guys, and welcome back again. And we're just going to continue from where we left off. And the last thing we did actually was just connecting to our database, making a couple of requests to our database, and then of course verifying if the data we're getting back are actually what they are expected to be. And like I promised the last time, the idea was actually for us that before we start in this tutorial for today, to actually just go through what we did in the last time. And mostly what we did actually was basically just I can actually just take you to this file over here. If I can find it, yes, this one. So mostly what we did actually was just to, of course, modify and make sure our queries was actually behaving the way we expected. Maybe I zoom in a little bit so you can see. And most of what we did actually was just to verify these queries and nothing so special right here actually. And so we had the inserts from the last time, we had our gets, and we had delete, and of course get all, which basically just retrieves everything from the database. Nothing so fancy. And of course in our main file, the only additional thing we also added was just to include this part where we basically execute this query initially to actually just execute what we have inside schema.sql. And that's also what we have over here. And I can actually just drop this once because we don't need it anymore. And basically we had this SQL file, which basically just creates two files for us, a to-dos files and a to-dos table rather, and of course a users table. And for now, we're actually not doing so much with this. We are mostly just focusing on our users right now. And actually what we can do is maybe for now, let's just use what we need. So I would just leave it as this. And maybe what I can actually just do is just to drop this table. So I can simply say drop table, and this would be this. But anyways, that's really not the bone of contention here yet. But the important thing, of course, is that we have the possibility to execute this file initially with the content and create the resources that we need. Okay, and then let's come back here. So this is covered, and most of all we again did for say our users auth services. Let's say user services already, like add user. All of these were actually covered in the last tutorial. It's as pretty straightforward as possible. And that's also why I've gone over here to, of course, check most of the things we did already. Um, the only thing we haven't covered here would actually be introduction to ORMs. I think we talked a little bit about it, but nothing so in depth. But I will leave it as like this for now. And towards the end, we would actually have more time to talk about this. But anyways, today what we would want to focus on would be on the topic of authentication and authorization. And we're going to briefly introduce and of course give you what the difference is between these two, and then we'll give you a brief introduction how we can work with JWT. So we'll try to sign our own JWT tokens and verify them ourselves, and then we can again look at how we can secure certain routes, and then we can again finally talk a little bit about session and session management. So this is actually like the setup of what we want to do today. And of course I don't want us to spend so much time just talking, so what we can actually do right now is to just jump in and start writing some code. Again, I'm going to just start up this server and using cargo watch. So we'll get auto reload, and then we can just proceed to write our code without bothering ourselves about stopping and restarting this source. I'm just going to do cargo watch execute run, and then this should start our server for us. And let's give it a couple of seconds or maybe minutes. So now our server is up, and what I can simply just do is to just collapse this terminal so we can have more room to work. And then I'll probably just close up all these files. So we start more or less on a clean note. So like we said, the first thing we'd want to do would be to work on JWT tokens. And maybe again, let's come back in here. So authentication and authorization are actually like quite important topics. So authentication more or less would pertain to when you try to verify if a user actually has the required permissions to have access to your application. And this is mostly what you're doing when you verify a user's credentials when say they try to log in. So when they have to gain access to your tool, what you are mostly verifying would be how you try to authenticate the user. You try to see if they actually have the required credential to have access to your application. But when it comes to authorization, an authenticated user might not be authorized to have access to everything you have in your application. So just take for instance, you could have different users with different roles. Some could be admins and some could be regular users, and you can already imagine like what they would have access to in your application would differ based on roles. And this again would mean more or less authorization. So you are authenticated, but you might not be authorized to access certain resources. It's more or less a privileged topic. Let's really proceed and see how we can implement signing and verification of JWT tokens in Rust, and then we can see how we can implement this to our routes and then secure our auth routes, and then we can verify all of this and see if everything is working before we move over to sessions. So what I'm simply just going to do is to come over here to utils. I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible for now. And like we said, we'll refactor as we go along. So I would have a file here called jwt.rs. Oh, I think I give that a wrong name. I have to rename that. And now, of course, I need to bring this, make sure this is discoverable. So I can say pub mod JWT. And now we can actually come in here and start making the changes we would want to do. So I would like to make this a model, so I can say pub mod JWT. And in here, I need just to have, for now, I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible. Like I said, I will need to have just two functions. I would have a function that says encode, and it should be able to just give me back a string if everything goes quite well. And I would need another one that says, of course, the code. So it's going to take a token. I'm just going to make this a string literal like this, and then it should return a Boolean. So of course I need to provide this. So this is really what we're going to do, just two functions, one encodes, and the other simply just returns, decodes a token and tells us if it is valid or not. That's really it. And what we actually, to do this, of course, we need the JSON web tokens create, and we can just go ahead and add that in here so we can use it. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here and add it, so JSON web token. So this is going to be version 9.3. And so what we can also do would be to, anyways, let's just go ahead and start working, but I'm just going to give this a couple of seconds or maybe minutes to install the package, and then we can proceed. So our installation is done. And of course, don't worry about the error. It's simply because we are promising to return a string here, for example, and nothing is being returned. Anyways, let's just jump right in. This shouldn't take us so much time. I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible, like we promised. So what we would need to do here is, of course, I would just proceed in a couple of steps. So I'll need to create an expiration time. I'll call this ESP time like this. And then I can call this ESP time. And of course, I'm just going to use the system time. So I say std time, and I say system time. And so I can see that now. Okay, and now I can maybe do some like modify this a little bit. So I can do like checked add, and I can make this maybe duration, and I can say maybe from sec or maybe from minutes. Let's say from minutes. Okay, I think we can only have seconds here, so I'm just gonna say let's from seconds, and then maybe I say 60 seconds. So this is just gonna be for 1 minute. And so of course there is an error. I just handle this error, and I can say duration since, and I can again make this, of course I would use epochs time here, so I can say system time, and I can say units epochs like this. Again, that's going to be an error, and I handle this error, and now I need this as seconds like this. And So of course, we're still not returning anything, so we still get our error, and that's also totally fine. And now what I would like to do more or less would be to create a claim. So to do that, I would like us to actually provide the user here when we are encoding the string. So this should come from user model. Do we have an error or not? Okay, so of course, when we have our user, or maybe before this, what I would want to do, let's just go to user model. I would like to define, let me collapse this. I'd like to define like a custom claim. So this would of course be whatever it is we would want it to be. And then would be what we can, like the information more or less will be encoding our token. So I would like to define the new struct here, and I can call this claims like this. And I can say a custom claim. I would like this to just be my user model, and then I can add things like pub. So this is going to be issued at, and again I need sub. This should also be a string. This will be of course the subject of the token, and I also need the audience. It's still going to be a string, and maybe of course the expiration time would be, let's say, use 64. And this is what I need. And now, so that's when I come in here, when you provide the user information over here, what we can actually now do down here would be to create a new claim. So I can simply just say, let's see, oh, this is not go. And then I can say claims, and then custom claim, of course, would be our user. And now we need to provide, we had issuer. For now, I'm just going to keep this as simple. But again, this is when you define this, you have to have this, let's say, defined in a .env file, and then you can actually reference it. But for now, I'm just going to hard code everything, doesn't really matter. And then we'll refactor again, like I said, while going forward. So I can say HTTP, yes, I can say github.com, Basilica, and this is going to be my issuer, and then I can make this to string. And so what else do I need? I need the subjects, and I can simply say this is our Rust track, whatever, and I say to string. And what else do we need? So we need audience. Again, I can simply say maybe Rust track, whatever, doesn't really matter. Again, to string, and then the expiration time would be this one we have over here. And I'm just gonna close this up, of course. So we have our claim. Now what I would want us to do would be to simply just create our header. So I can maybe add a comment here and I say create a header, and this would now come for our JSON web tokens. Is that imported for us? So I say JSON web token, and I can see header, and maybe I just use the default for now. And this would be my header. I can just simply give it a name. So header, and so secrets. So I can say let's secrets. And so we are just going to have something in our .env file. Can I just use this macro? Let me see. Yes, of course. So I can simply call this something like JWT secret. Okay. And the next thing why are you giving me an error? Does it return an error? Okay, so I'm just going to keep it simple. Var. Okay. And maybe I just handle this right away, and I can say JWT secret was not common set. And then we have our JWT secret. And the next thing now would just be for us to generate our key. So I can simply say let key. Our key would be JSON web token. I say encoding key. I can say from secrets, this one. And I can simply just provide my secrets here and then maybe provide it as bytes. Okay, and now we have our key, and then the what is that? Okay, that's also fine. So the next thing we would now do would just be to encode. So I can call this our token, and our token would just be JSON web token, and we can simply call the encode function. Now we provide a reference to our header. For the claim, this would be of course a reference to the claim we had, and we called it C. And the last thing of course would be our key. And for now, let's do like an unwrap. And then we have our string. And now this string we can simply return like this. And we have an error. So let me quickly try to fix that. This of course has to do with our claim struct. And of course, from what you can already see here, we're already missing some traits that we are actually not defined. So we can quickly fix that. So we say derive, and I'll need do I really need debug? Okay, let me leave it for now. And I can say deserialize and maybe even serialize. And that should be fine. And so now we have our JWT token. So the next thing, of course, we would need to do, like we said, would be to implement a method whereby we decode this token and then verify it. So I can say let validation would be JSON web token. There's a handy function called validation. I can say new. And the algorithm I would like to provide, of course, will be HS256. Again, so let's just JSON web token algorithm, and it's HS256. So this would be our validation. And then the next thing I can already do is again get my secrets. I'm just going to copy this guy from here. So this again would be my secret. And so with our secrets, the last thing would need again would just be our decoding key. And I'm just again going to copy this like we did here. So this will of course be our decoding key. The only difference of course would be the method would change. So instead of encoding key, this will now be decoding key. Okay. And now the only thing we now need to do would be to more or less validate more or less validate our token. And it's pretty straightforward. I can simply delete results, and the result would be JSON web token. Again, there is a handy function called decode. And then in here, I simply need to again provide my token, provide my key, and provide validation. And of course, over here, it's like more or less what I'm returning is not known, but what we can already do is to come over here and just provide a hint, the type that we want to return. And again, this will just be our claims. And let me remove that, that was a typo. And now we should have our result. And now this is actually where you do like now to verify the content of the token, maybe verify the user exists in your database and whatever. But for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. And what I'm going to do here would be to simply say something like, so results. Of course, this is an enum. So to keep it simple, maybe what I can actually do would be to do something like this. So I don't need to name this anymore. I can simply match what we get back in here. That's also pretty fine. So we get, of course, we can have like an OK where we get our token, and we still do some validation with our token. And otherwise, we have an error arm We don't really need the contents, and here I can simply return false, and let's say return false. And then in here, what we can now do is more or less handle these parts. So we have our token, and again, we can do something simple like this. Let's say token dot claims dot let's say something like the issuer. You can say if this is equal to this, and this is one thing we can actually do. So again, there are a lot of things you can do here, but the point is actually to show you the basics you need to either generate and validate. And from this point, you can now do maybe again, even evaluate the expiration time and whatever. There's so much you can do, but let's keep it simple like we said. So let's just proceed. Let's try to use this and see how this actually could pan out for us. But before we do that, I'm actually just going to go ahead and provide this JWT secrets. Again, it's going to be in my env file, but I don't want to show it, of course, because the database connection string is there already. But anyways, I'm just going to add this and maybe even add the issuer, subject, and audience, or whatever, and then we can proceed. So again, I've just gone ahead to make the modifications we need. And now you see I'm no longer hard coding these values. Now they are inside our .env file. And now we are simply just referencing them this way. So now what we can do would be, for example, we can just go to our main file, and then just for demo purposes, what we can actually do is to come down here. And now let's just try to use this and see what happens. So we can say utils JWT, and I can say something like let's simply say encode. Now, of course, we had JWT as the package, the module more or less, and now we can say encode. And in here, I would like to maybe provide a user, and we don't have this already. So what I can already do is to come over here and define a user. So this would be our user model. And we need to provide, of course, the attributes of this user. And so we have first name, last name, email, password, ID. So first name, that's just string. So first name, I'm just gonna copy all of this. Last name, email, password, and of course ID. And now I can just maybe Tony, just to keep it simple. 18, email sample@gmail.com. Password would be whatever, don't matter. And of course ID would be, of course, some boring ID. And now we of course encode our token, and we need to get something back so we can validate. So I can say let's token, so we get back our token. And now what we can again simply do is JWT, and we say JWT. I have to take care of these imports. JWT, I will say decode, and then I provide the token again. And do we need more than one thing? Okay, so this is actually expecting string literal, not this way. Okay, so I'll just pass this by reference, and then this should still be fine. And then of course, let's see, this gives us just a Boolean, and maybe I can call this let's res. And now we can just maybe simply print statement here. So we can say print line. This the validation was successful. And we can simply just provide our arrays this way. And I'll just close this up. And so you simply just maybe let me open this up. And then let's see what happens. So now we get a false. And now let's try to actually see why we got a false. So maybe one thing we can actually do, we already can just go to this decode token over here. And then at this point, this might be the issue we are having. So I'm probably just gonna give this, make this a variable again, just for us to verify. I can say let's issuer be equal to this. Okay, and now what I would want to do here, maybe I'll just print this issuer, and I'll also maybe print the one I get from the token. So token dot command. Oh, okay, I provide it this way. Claims dot issuer, and I can say maybe just say token issuer, and I save this. So let's see. We don't get this. So what we can simply do to actually help us debug is I'm just going to come here and provide an error. And then this one, of course, I can wrap this in curly braces. Come on, like this. And now, of course, I would like to maybe print this error just to see what the content actually is. And error. And let's, of course, close this up. And let's see. Let's be a little bit patient. So was not successful, and we get invalid audience. Of course, in the validation, of course, we didn't provide the audience. So here I can actually say validation dot set audience, and this should of course be a vector. So this like this, and then I can maybe just copy this audience we had here and put it in here and close this up. And yes, of course, make this guy immutable. And now let's see. Okay, now you can see our validation actually passes. And now what we can now do is to integrate this into our app, and then of course verify the user. So we can maybe when you log in, we give you a token, and then when you want to make a request, then we'll have to verify this token. So let's just do that. Let's just do that next. So now that we have the JWT encoding and decoding completed, and if you look down here, you can already see, of course, this is what we would expect. So what I would try to do is more or less try to see if we can integrate this to one of or some of our endpoints, because again, this would really not be useful to us anyways. So I'm just going to get rid of this from here, and of course maybe remove the import as well. We really don't need this anymore. And now what we can quickly do is to maybe go to our login endpoint here, and then just try to see if we can actually reuse that in here. But before then, I'd like to add a new method in our DB module here so we can actually retrieve a user by its email. So I'm just actually just going to go ahead and duplicate this one, and then I'll call it get by email. And then this ID, I'm just going to change this to email. So it becomes email. Again, I'll change it in here. So this place will also be email. So we'll use this method more or less to retrieve a user by his email. So now I can come back to login. And then over here, what I would want to do is to, we don't need this anymore. It's also not useful to us anymore. So remove this. And maybe before then I can go to, let's see, users, maybe get users. And then I need this return type actually, because I want to be able to also return an error if there happens to be one. So I replace this here. And now what I can actually do would be, do I have this imported? No, I don't have HTTP errors. So I can maybe remove these parts and say HTTP error, this one. And now we have it in here. So what I can actually quickly do is to try to now use this function that we added over here to retrieve by email, because we already have the user information, this requests information over here. So we can simply say get by email, and then in here I have to provide requests.email, and then the pool, of course, we have this from our app data, so app data.pool, and that's more or less it. But of course, we now have to handle the response that we get from here. It could be a user model, the actual user, or an error. So now let's match this, and now we have to provide our two arms, the OK arm and the error arm. So I can say OK, and then what we get back should be our user. And then with this user, we can simply then get our token. So I can say let token equal to JWT. I can simply call encode. Should be this guy. And then I pass my user. It's already passed. And so what I can now do with this would be to simply maybe return this back to the user. So I can say HTTP response. Okay. And then of course I just provide a body. And then in the body, I'm just going to pass the token, and that's it. And now, of course, we have our error arm. So we have an error, and what we would probably do with it is simply to return it back to the user. So I can say error. So again, pass our HTTP error, and then I can say maybe unauthorized. And I can get rid of this actually. And of course, our function here is async. We have to await it actually. And yes, here we can just, it's also fine. We can simply clone it, and then that should be fine. So now we have our login endpoint, and basically we try to retrieve the user information. For now, we're not doing any validation, just to see if our JWT part is working actually. And maybe here I can simply just print this part, doesn't really matter. And I can simply print the error this way. Or we also cannot show it anyways, whichever way, whatever is interesting for you. But anyways, what we can again just go ahead to do would be to go to our HTTP file. And so here I added just an endpoint that goes to the login, and then we can try to send a request. And then as you see over here, we get a JWT token back. So this would be for this specific user. Of course, if this user doesn't exist, we would not get anything from the database. Again, the validation we are leaving out for now because we just want to focus on the JWT part. And anyway, so that would be one way we can actually use the JWT encoding and decoding that we implemented. And of course, we have the option to actually now go ahead and put it in all our endpoints. But of course, that would not be the most ideal way. The most ideal way, more or less, would be for us to implement a middleware and then have those middleware wrap like specific authenticated endpoints. And then we don't have to go in individually into the endpoints to add those guardrails, more or less. So that would be it for now. So again, let's proceed. But before we move to middlewares, I would like to talk to you about guards in Actix. So guards, maybe I come back to maybe our, let's go to APIs, go to maybe, then, so in here, what we can actually do is simply say guard. And then so what you can actually do with guards is that it gives you the option to actually have like filters around your route. So the main focus actually is more or less to filter routes. So if you can look at this example here, you have the option to filter more or less by like this content type header. So basically what it means is that all of the routes here, like you have route test 1 and test 2, have to have this in the header. If not, these are not even going to be matched anyways. And apart from headers, of course, you can also match the methods. So we can say guard, and then we can even match, say, get, for example. And then what it means is that with these endpoints, both of them actually, no matter what, have to be gets, otherwise they will not be matched. And but again, you also have the option to actually compose these filters. Because again, you can already just you really just need to think of them as filters, and then you also just remember that with filters, of course, you can always compose them. So here we can actually do something like guard dot I think we can do or once again this should be so you of course you can also do negation, but what I really want to show is that we have the option to actually chain them together. Again, you still have like all and all that, and but so we can do and say any. And with this, what we can actually do is that we can actually chain them together. Again, if you look at the example, you see here we have like guard any, and then it can now be like either a get or a post. That's just one way. And of course, we can implement ours as well. So this is just one quick thing I would want to show you, and then maybe to again buttress the fact the much further, what we can do is maybe implement ours actually as quickly as possible so it doesn't take so much of our time. So let me go to utils and create a file. And I'm just going to call this guard.rs. And of course, I bring this in here, pub mod guard. Oh, did I name that TS? Oh my God, sorry about that. And this should be fine now. And so let's come in here. And what I would like us to do more or less would be to implement our own guards. And so the point is that if we want to, if the inbuilt guards don't actually cut it for us and we would want to implement additional features or maybe even compose much complex guards, we also have the option to do that. So in here, I can create a struct and I can call this a context. So for example, I want to check a certain context type header, for example. So this is one way I can actually do it. I can create my own structs this way. The only really important thing that you have to do is that you have to implement the guard threat for your struct. So I can import guard for context type header, and that's really it. And of course, there is one function which is to check function. And then here, the function always, as you can see from the signature, has to return a Boolean. But what I can actually do here is to maybe simply, I can maybe this context, of course, I can of course refer to it as my request. And maybe I can remove this for now. And then in here, what I can actually do is now request.head. And then within the head, I want to check the headers. And within the headers, I want to check if it contains a certain key, and maybe the key I'm looking for is HTTP. So let me go back because IntelliSense, HTTP, of course, and then I can go to header, and then maybe I'm looking for this authorization header. And that's really all I need. So what it means is now with this guard implemented here, I can actually come in here, let's say into our auth, and then up here I can add enemy indent. I can say guard, and in here I can add my content type. Come on, help me out. Sorry, not content. Yes, it's content. Sorry, actually, I think I give this a wrong name. I can call this, it's not content type, actually, it's authorization header. And let's copy this. Again, this is just an example. Can do much more complex stuff with this. So anyways, I can now name this common authorization header. And that's one way we can actually have this. So what it means is that for all these our services here, they all have to have the authorization header. And if not, then this would not even filter through to our endpoints. So that's just one quick something I wanted to show you that you can do with filters. Anyways, let's move ahead. Now I would like us to talk about middlewares. I've gone ahead to create this middleware folder, and then in here I have like this auth rs. Of course, you can see it's still empty, and then in here we have our mod auth, and of course I don't think this is in focus. I can come in here and of course add it, say pub moth middleware. And now this should, of course, the color should change this way. So what I would like us to do here is to implement our own authentication middleware. So this is going to handle the whole looking for the authorization header in our request, and of course verifying if it is valid. And then before it can actually move on to the request I would want to do. So that way we can just wrap all our auth endpoints with this authorization middleware without having to individually go into each of those endpoints, actually add them. So basically to do that, I actually need two structs. So one is going to define my token. I can call this token auth. And the next struct that I would need would be, this would now be my token auth middleware. And it's simply just going to have one attribute called service. That's going to be of a generic type S. And because of that, of course, I have to pass this here. So sorry, the point would be that this would more or less be the for initialization, of course, of my middleware, and with token auth middleware will actually contain the actual implementation. And so for two things would actually want to do. So with definition of middleware with Actix, you have like what is referred to as the initialization step, and of course you have like where you have to implement like a factory thread more or less on your middleware. So what it means is that for our token auth, I would have to first implement a transform threads for it, and again it's more or less pretty straightforward. So we can say import, and we need transform. And transform, of course, I have to now provide the types, because again, remember I'm using a generic type in here, and I would also want to provide that here. So because of that, I'm just going to come in here and provide this here, and then down the road I have to of course provide what this should be. So here we have S, and then of course we need service request, and this would be for token auth. And we have our add our where keyword. So S would be service. Then of course service would be, within service would have of course our service request. Our response would be service response. And of course you have to take this type B. And then we need an error. And an error would be Actix error. We use error of course from Actix. And we have our, because I need to add a future. So is that future? So this would be like a static, static more or less. And then the last thing, of course, I have to define will be B. So again, B would be again a static like this. And now we actually add the body of our implementation more or less. I actually need to indent this to make it look a little bit cleaner. Now here I can define all of what we talked about, so I can take it one by the other. So let's go with error. So error is going to be error, of course, and we go with future. So future is going to be ready, and then within ready we have a result, and then here would be self, the transform, and self init error. And I implement the other types. So I have init error, or maybe I actually just bring this up here first. Type init error would just be actually this units. It wouldn't really do much. and type transform. Transform would be our token middleware. And what else is missing? We have error, we have init error, we have transform, and we have future. And now, of course, we now need to add our function. So we need to implement, sorry, not type. So we need to implement our function, new transform, this one. And thus, I also need to provide, of course, type response. This is going to be our service response. It's going to take B. And why do we have error here? Let me see. Yeah, we still are missing some implementation for our token middleware here, but of course we'll get to that in a minute. So in here, I'm just going to call ready, and then I'm simply just going to say okay. And then in here, I'll simply provide my token middleware and initialize it this way with our service. That's really all I would want to do in here. Again, okay, now sorry, let's go ahead and implement what we need for our token auth middleware. So of course we need to implement the service traits. So I can say import service, and then here would be service request. And for our token of middleware, so this would be S, and of course maybe in here I already add our generic types, which again is going to be S and B. Come on. And of course now I need to again define what this means. So where again this would be again, come on, so service, and then within here of course provide the type would be our service request, and again response would be our service response, and then I provide type B. Okay, of course we have to define what this means anyways, and we have our error, and error would be error. Okay, and then down here again it's future would again be static like we did before, and then our B would be static as well. And now I can provide the body more or less. So in here I define my types. So type error would be error, type future would be local, come on help me, local box future. Why am I not getting IntelliSense? Okay. Okay, I don't have this installed. So let's go to maybe on this window, I can open Cargo Toml, and then I need to install features utils, and then I need version 0.3. And then just give that a couple of minutes to install, and then we can proceed. So our installation is done. So now I need local box future. Again, I have to provide, this should be static. And then apart from static, now I need to provide, so I have a results parts, and within here, of course, has to be an enum. So two things, either a response, self response. So it's either this or we get an error, self error. Okay, and then of course in here the next thing again that I would like to define the type again would not be our response. So type response, And maybe I actually bring this up. So again, this will be our service response. So type would be, because our B, and now maybe I bring this up here actually. No, not here. We are bring this of the service response like this. And now, of course, in here we need to actually implement the most important thing we will need to implement here would actually be just one function called call. So be like the function call. We also have the option to implement this pull ready function, and there are actually two ways we could do it. So we could actually do a forward ready. So we can actually use the forward ready macro this way and simply provide a service. So we can actually just call this using our forward ready macro. I can close this up this way and this should be fine. Or we also have the option to actually implement the pull ready function. But of course, we are not getting IntelliSense because again, this implements this. So it's more or less like implement this twice. But if I comment this out, for example, I can now again start typing pull ready, and now you see we get IntelliSense, and now we can actually feed this out. So this gives us the option to actually add more features in here, or add maybe more functionality on the way we want our middleware to be pulled. Anyways, I'm just gonna leave it as simple as possible. So I'm simply gonna say serve.service that pull ready, and then I just pass the context, and that's already enough for us for the pull ready function. But the important thing for us would be the call method. And that's also why you see we were having all of these errors, because we needed to implement. This is the really most important function here that we have to implement. That is not optional at all. Okay, so this is what the signature should look like. Of course, we're getting this error now because we need to return a future, but if you're looking here, actually nothing is being returned. So in here, what we can simply do, I can call this auth. I would like to get the, let me make this all snake case. I would like to get the authorization header in this request. So I can say request.headers, and maybe I do like a functional programming, so I can bring this down here. So headers, and I can say that's get, and what I actually need to get here would be my authorization. So I need a header that says authorization, and that's the important thing for us here. But we get back an enum, so it's we get back a value that can actually be an auth header value, or it can actually be none. So it could be set or it could not be set. It's not an enum actually, it's an optional value. So what we can now do more or less would be to try to match this value. So I can simply use the if let syntax. I can say if let sum. So if this value actually does exist, of course, this would be our auth, called it auth header. Why do I not get IntelliSense anymore? Anyway, so if this, I'll give it, um, oh, let me actually still assign it auth header, and more or less. So if we actually have a value, so in here now we have access to our header value. At this point, it exists. So, but again, if we are using an if statement, we have to provide an else block. So that's also what this error is really about. So we need an else block more or less. So can do an else. So at this point, it means we actually do not have this authorization header set in the header of the request. So we can simply return to the user, but we can't just return anything. We need to return a future. So I need the box, and then I can say pen, and then here I can now do an async move. What I would want to do in here is simply to return the error. So I need to wrap this in error. Then in here, I can already, maybe there are already some predefined error within Actix that you can use, and one of them might be the I think it's error unauthorized. Error unauthorized. I think this one. And then in here, we can actually just provide our error. So here I can maybe add something like authorization header was not present in request. And then of course I need to I need to make this a string. So I can say to string, come on, I can say to string, and then this part should be fine. So, but in here, we now need to handle the value we have. So I can now call this, I can say let's auth, or maybe let's say auth token. Our auth token would not be our auth data. Oh, come on, auth header rather, auth header, and I can now say to string. So at this point, we have access to our token. Again, we get back an option, so it could or could not be. So here again, I would like to match, so I can say auth token. So there are two things that could happen. So we would have an OK part. At this point, we would have access to our token, and we do something with our token. And otherwise, we could also have an error part where we are not able to have access to our token. And then again, I can handle this part this way. In here again, I would like to return like something similar to what we had here. So I can copy this, bring this in here. But the only thing that would change more or less for us at this point would be, of course, we have this error and I would like to return this to the user. So I have to maybe pass this in here. I think I can still do it to string like this. And then we are good here. So now the important part for us would be in here where we have access to our token. So now we decide what do we want to do to this with this token. So now maybe I would like to do to validate this token. So I can say the code. Let me see if it can help us in here. So we have this create in here, and now I pass my token, of course. So now I can say if or what we can just do here, we can say something like if not. So if this is not the case, if we are not able to validate this token, or maybe I don't like the way I imported this JWT because it might be confusing. There could be a lot of other functions called the code, so I like to have it this way. So, but anyways, at this point, if this is not valid, again, what I would like to do is return something similar. So at this point, we have access to our token, and we can simply, of course, call our JWT decode, and we pass our token. And this should be able to, of course, validate our token for us. But of course, this returns a Boolean, and we have to handle this as well. So we can simply say if this is not the case. Again, we'll do exactly what we did somewhere here. So I'm just going to copy this part and bring it here. So if this is not the case, I could say something like authorization header is invalid, something like this. And that should take care of that for us. And then I need again something like this down here, because at this point we need to be able to, of course, handle a scenario whereby all of this fails, and that of course would be our plan. So on like the best case would be we actually scale through all of these blocks here, and then at this point we can actually make the next request. So down here I can now say let future be equal to self.service service.call, and I pass the request. And of course, let me close this up. And now we have access to our request. And now here I can simply just again do a box pin. And then here again we do an async move. And then down here I can simply, of course, say let's res would be equal to future.await. And we also handle any possible errors. And then here we simply again return the response like this. And of course, we have to take this out because we already outside the function call. So down here, I just paste that back in and this should be fine. So this is really all we have to do to have our auth middleware. And again, we are actually not doing much. Again, if you remember our JWT implementation, we are simply checking if the token is still valid, and then we actually just return it true. And then we were also actually looking at the, if I can still come back in here, and let's go to utils JWT. So we are just really looking at the you're really looking at the audience. So, but again, you can do much more than this. And to use this, I can quickly maybe come into our main function and then maybe let's say below our public services, maybe after here, I can now add my wrap function. And then in here, I can provide my token auth. And then every service, of course, that comes afterwards would be authenticated. So of course, maybe at some point, this health we have in here can actually go into the health on the public services, or maybe you have like another grouping or whatever, but I think it's actually might belong in here. So anyways, that's really all I wanted to show you regarding middlewares. Of course, you can already imagine there's so much more you can do with them. The most important thing, of course, is what happens within this function call here. And this is where you decide. You also have the options. Actually, there are a lot of things you could do. That is like I think it's called the either this one, and then there is a right and left. So you have the option, of course, to implement middlewares where you decide, okay, if this is the case, I want it to perform this, and if not, then this, more or less like an if else block. And then you have this like left and right helper functions that actually helps you to guide like where that's those operations in what direction they should go. So anyways, I invite you to actually explore this much further on your own, just to deepen more or less your knowledge regarding how, and not just with this, but of course with any other thing you would be working with. It makes a lot of sense to, again, on your own, explore things, go beyond what you've been shown, and then to discover or maybe begin to have insights as to what you could probably do with this. So the quick last thing I would want to show you would be like sessions. It's just going to be a quick one. I already did a video in the past, and I'm going to leave a link also here so you can look this up. It's like a really in-depth, detailed tutorial where we talked about the different backends you could actually use for session management. Could be Redis, could be an actual database, a Postgres, or even a SQL like MySQL, Microsoft SQL database, or whatever any key value store. I did like an extensive tutorial on this, even in memory caching, cookie caching, like also on the clients. I did like an in-depth session. I'm going to add a link to that video in this tutorial so you can explore it on your free time. But with Actix, I'm just going to show you a quick intro, more or less, how you can proceed with this. For that, I would need to install a new package because I will try to stay within the Actix ecosystem. So I will install Actix session, and I'm going to go with version 0.10. And then let's just give that a couple of seconds or maybe minutes to install, and then we can proceed. So our installation is done, and now I can actually close this once. We don't need this anymore. And then let's go to our main file. So again, you have the option to have your um, session more or less again defined as a middleware, and so that you can of course again have the flexibility to put it whatever you would want to put it. And but for this example, I'm just going to use like the Actix session middleware, the session middleware from Actix. So what we can now do, we have the option to actually use like different backends with the Actix session that's installed. So what we can go ahead to do now is to add different features to give us the option to use those different backends. And to use those different backends, what we can simply do is I'm just going to open a new terminal here and then maybe open our cargo terminal so you actually see what I'm doing. So I can do a cargo add. So we had Actix session we have this already, but I want to add this feature. So this feature, the first one would be cookie session. And seems that we've had, so let me see, cargo add. Of course, there was no space in here. It should be features. And now we have this here, cookie session. So we should be able to add this. And what I would also want to do down here would be to maybe also add Redis session. And this will of course add Redis session for us as well. So now I can maybe collapse this. I just wanted to show you that. And then we can maybe come back to main. So in here, I can now have the option to actually use these different backends that we installed. So the first pretty straightforward one we can actually use would be, maybe I can already start with showing you for Redis. It's pretty straightforward again. So I can come in here. Let's give that a couple of seconds to complete the installation, and then we can proceed. And I think it's fine now. So what I would want to do is, of course, from my Actix Web, I would need to install, to bring in, actually not install, cookie key. And then in here, what I can quickly do is to maybe I can define the key. This would be my key dot generate. This will provide me with a key. And then here I can define my Redis store. My Redis store would come from Redis session store dot new. And then in here, you have to provide the URL of a running Redis server. So this could be, I don't know, locally or whatever, or within a Docker container .0.1, and then the port would be 6379. This is something you would already need to have running. So I await this and unwrap. And then we have access to our Redis store. And now to, of course, use this pretty straightforward again. I can maybe come down in here and use the warp function again, the wrap function rather. And then in here, maybe what I can simply do would be to use my session middleware. I say that's new. So for store, I'm just going to add my Redis store, or maybe I clone this. And then for key, I have my key already, and then I can maybe also clone this as well. And that's really all you need to add to Redis store, more or less as your for the storage of your sessions. And then of course you work with Redis the way you would normally, maybe get key, add, remove, or whatever, just to of course manage again with the lifetimes of what you've stored in your session. And this is it, working with Redis. Again, you have the option of working with a cookie store as a backend. It's also again pretty straightforward. All you need to do again is just do something quite similar to what we had here. So here we simply initialize this connection, and then we wrap this using our session middleware. That's really all you have to do. Anyways, guys, that would be all I wanted to show you in this series. I hope it was actually helpful for you at least. And in the next series, if we can come over here. So here we try to cover almost everything we had in here. Again, like I said, to give a much more in-depth discussion here, I've provided, like we provide a link to its tutorial that I already did in the past, elaborating how you can extensively work with this. So again, I covered more than this. So beyond cookie-based Redis, we had also like in memory, we also had implemented our own caching system and such and such. So take your time, go through this and check it out, and you would of course get everything you need. Anyways, guys, this is getting quite longer than expected, so we have to draw the curtains here. Thank you for being part of the journey, guys. And yeah, of course, if you're new, just go ahead and subscribe, and we would constantly keep you bring you much interesting topics, and that's of course should prove useful for you in your day-to-day lives. Anyway, guys, that will be all for now, and I hope to see you soon. Have a lovely day.